Marc.
Hello.
Hi. Really good to have you in Cardiff. I actually started following you on Twitter, and then I unfollowed you for some reason, and I really did think that you were a very young photographer.
Oh, right.
I probably didn't read the about bit on your page, but looking at your work, and I was really intrigued and liked the sort of contrasty black and white nature of it all, and the visceral nature of the stuff you were shooting. How long did it take you to find your voice? And it sounds really cheesy, but how long did it take you to find your voice as a photographer?
That's an interesting question. I think I lost my voice or visual language about halfway through the last 20 years when I started photographing the protest stuff. I think at the beginning in the mid-90s, the surfers, skaters in South New Jersey, on the East Coast, all that stuff. Then back in a little bit in the later 90s, back in London, with kind of the queer alternative scene, shooting on a mixture of black and white and colour film. I had a studio in Limehouse, darkroom. I used to handprint the colour prints, all of that. I definitely had a style, definitely had a visual language, and I think I've definitely got that now. But when I kind of spent 8 years documenting political protest, I think I lost it a little bit. I was shooting more for news. I was shooting more for the, there and then, filing it and getting it to the desks. I don't think I was particularly good at it at first, covering political protest. There's a lot better people.
In what sense do you not think you were good enough for shooting?
I remember being interviewed by a magazine about the youth culture stuff and saying, you're a political person, why isn't your work political? And I was saying, well, my work is political. It's skaters, it's punk, it's surfers. Of course it's political, but you're really political, you're really left-wing. And it kind of seeped in my consciousness. And I thought, well, maybe I'll start looking at political protest. And I started doing that. And then at the very beginning of it, I look at those pictures now and I'm horrified. But I got better over time. And I think towards the end of it, particularly like with the Millbank stuff and all of that, I think I kind of got into the really good groove. And I was doing really, really good pictures. I was proud of those pictures. But I still didn't feel I'd really quite got what I wanted. And when I sort of moved away from that after 8 years, I kind of went back to where I started, really. And that was skateboarding, youth culture, then the graffiti work, the queer scenes, all of that. And somewhere along the line, it was moving back into black and white. And it's kind of the Japanese photographers, and the blacks are really black.
Yes.
And really dark and heavy, and my designer and the printers hate me for that.
Yeah.
The paper dust on the zines. I mean, every zine before it leaves my place is checked by me, and I throw them away if there's even if a slight out of alignment, because the pictures go across. One picture goes across 2 pages, so even just a fraction of a millimetre white line will jump out because the blacks are so black. It works for me.
Basically, a brave decision to opt out of that news element and go for something that you wanted to do. Was there a sort of seminal moment? Was there a sort of road to Damascus moment when you decided, no, I'm not doing what I want to do, really?
I think there's a mixture of different things that happened that led me to that decision. I think there's the economics of it. The freelance photographers shooting news or public order work. The way the structure of the industry is now, with particularly with the agencies, and every newspaper will have the subscription deals. They've already bought the picture before they've got it. Why would they pay a few £100s to a freelancer? It would have to be particularly different and better. There was a couple things. There was the amount of times I was assaulted by the police didn't help. Taking up cases against the police. I'm proud of all the stuff we did about photographers' rights and all of that. That was really good. But I had really got to a point where I kind of wanted out of that world. But it was covering the Millbank riots when the Conservative government, or the coalition government, had increased student fees. And, it was a very hard day photographing the Tory HQ getting smashed up. I'm really proud of the pictures I got that day, and there's a particular picture that a number of photographers got And that picture was on the front page of every newspaper the next day, and the Guardian critics wrote about how it was a seminal, amazing, poignant picture, and I agree. I know, but it wasn't my picture. I was standing next to the guy who got that picture, but I was kind of thinking after that day, what am I doing? Why am I here? Why have I put myself through all of this to not make any sales and risk limb and life maybe? And I also, even though I think I was a better photographer of covering political protests by then, I won out.
Did you feel protected by your camera at all during protests?
Depends. Sometimes you're a target because of your camera.
Yeah.
A
target by both sides?
Both sides, multiple sides. I photographed a number of the English Defence League protests. Some of them are right-wing nationalists, some of them are neo-Nazis. And they would go after the cameras. At one particular time when my camera was smashed into my face by a protester. That protester got a police caution for it. But in 2006, I was hospitalised by the police. I successfully sued them and did that again in 2008. So, I think you are a target sometimes, yeah.
Don McCullin he said something on Radio 4 the other day that he thought photojournalism was dead. There's no photojournalism anymore, that because access is limited to what you can do. He spent some time in Syria. He went to Palmyra and had a look at Palmyra. He took one shot of Palmyra because there were soldiers telling him that he couldn't go any further, couldn't do any more. And that sort of restriction, I suppose, is that part of what's happening to us as a society, that everything is being clamped down and being sanitized? Directly or indirectly, is that true, or do you think that is something that's happening?
It's a good question. I don't think photojournalism is dead, because there's a lot of photojournalists and photojournalism imagery that gets made.
Yeah.
I think the photojournalists that say live in the West Bank or in Gaza, they wouldn't say that their photojournalism is dead, and those photographers, Palestinians who are providing content to Getty and AP and AFP, I'm sure, and then we see that imagery in newspapers or on TV screens, and we're informed. I think and there's still an economic system within photojournalism to fund that to a point.
Yes.
Obviously, it has changed dramatically, even in my short period of 20 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, Don McCullen's obviously got a longer period of looking at it, and nostalgia is a tricky thing at the best of time.
It is indeed.
So there is photojournalism, there is good photojournalism, there's great photojournalists, but the world has changed. There is Instagram.
Yeah.
Kodak's dead. The unit cost of a picture is less. Companies won't fund stories in the way they used to. Freelancers will go off and self-fund a story, take all the risks, do all the insurance to get the story wherever they go and get it, and then bring it back and then sell the story. So there's all sorts of things going on. So I think it's a much more complicated time that we're living in. But then you can relate that to the generalised maybe kind of privatisation and atomization and neoliberalisation of everything.
Yes, indeed.
From public-private space to how a picture editor works on a newspaper that is losing 50 million a year.
It's quite interesting, because if you take what is called a big camera out in Cardiff,
right,
you will soon find out where the private spaces are, because they descend on you from on high, and you have situations where you ask the guy, well, where is the public space, and he'll say over there. You take one step and you're still shooting the same material. But they get quite upset by all that.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
It is very, very bizarre indeed. And Cardiff is developing like that. For example, the big art centre, the Millennium Centre down in Cardiff Bay, has little stars dotted all the way around it. And if you shoot within the star, you incur the wrath of the Millennium Centre, which is an art centre, and they descend on you and say you are not allowed to take pictures. But if you have a small camera, of course, they think you're a tourist. So, there are sort of ways around shooting like that. But you're an old punk, really, aren't you?
Yes. Troublemaker.
A troublemaker.
Always. Well, my first ever job was the typesetter and layout artist.
Right, okay.
On a left-wing weekly newspaper in the 80s.
Right. Called?
The Militant.
Yeah, okay. When you worked on Militant and you were seeing other people's work and disseminating other people's work, what sort of influence did that have on you as a photographer?
That's a really good question. Because I was a typesetter and layout artist, and so back then it was before desktop publishing. So with pencil and ruler and calculator, working out from the characters of the art, we were given floppy disks and had a character count of the page of the words, and would work out the column in inches and the M's and point sizes, and then go set it on a computer, and it go out to a Lightron. I can't remember what it was. And it goes through the chemistry, whatever. Slap it down, blah blah blah. So obviously, when you were designing the page, you factored in the picture, and the sub editors would have given you the picture that would go in. And the Militant had its own staff photographer or staff photographers. One of them is Dave Sinclair, who I still know. We're Facebook friends, and he's from Liverpool. And obviously Militant was rather big in Liverpool, and Dave was in Liverpool, and he used to frighten the life out of me, especially if I cropped his pictures in a bad way to fit the text. And he'd swear at me and throw loads of abuse at me. So I learned a lot how not to crop a photographer's picture badly, because they'd shout at you. But that was all those Liverpool pictures, all the poll tax pictures, all that kind of stuff. Amazing archive of working class history, of political activism, stuff on the left. For 5 years I was laying that stuff out. It must have had an effect as for me later, because when I left working there, I went to art school and then became a photographer. So it must have all fed in, and it must also feed into how I do the zines and self-publishing, because I've got even though I've got a designer that does my stuff, but I've got an eye, and I'm very prescriptive in how I want it to work. So I know how to lay out a page. But yeah, there was some amazing photography that came through those years that was vibrant and very, very, very political. And it's nice I'm still friends with him, actually, because I have a huge respect to him as a photographer.
Does all that stuff lie in an archive somewhere, Mark?
I think he's got it. So I think he's done a couple of books.
Right, okay.
I think there's a recent one on Liverpool. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that Cafe Royale would like, I think. I think I think there's so many amazing photographers out there. They've got amazing archives, all that kind of stuff. And even though I think my road on the protest stuff was rocky at the beginning, I think obviously I feel I was better towards the end. But there are photographers that have been doing it a lot longer than me and better than me, and to get hold of their archives and do something interesting with it would be amazing. I mean, I think there's always been a bit of a photography editor in me somewhere along the line, and I have toyed with the idea of publishing other people's work. Okay. That's something I have thought about in the past.
And what about collaborations as well? Do you do collaborations? Do you with other photographers? Or?
I have. I mean, Brian David Stevens. We did the writers, not the writers' zine because that was mine, but we did a show down Leek Street on the Waterloo station, and because we worked on the graffiti stuff early together. That was really good. Brian's a good friend. I mean, we met covering protests. Literally covering protests. We became friends. So I've done collaborations with him. Collaborations with the Photocopying Club when we did the Xerox and Destroy show. Matt Martin, a young photographer, really a great photographer. The Photocopying Club project that he's done is brilliant.
Yes,
he curates the Doom Gallery. So I think collaboration is important.
Yeah, I think that's what we lack here in Wales. Actually, is this sometimes when we meet people who come from London, or photographers in London working, and the vibrancy of a photographic scene, if you like, in London compared to down here is immense, really. And there's a vast difference. But there's so much here to photograph. I mean, living in Cardiff, I don't actually live in Cardiff anymore, but I could spend my whole life photographing City Road in Cardiff and the streets behind City Road, because it is an exceptional place with exceptional people in it, and exceptional things happening all the time in that particular street, and graffiti art happening there as well.
Right.
That's another question I wanted to ask. There's a lot of sort of commissioned street art.
Yeah.
and then behind the streets is where you get all the action happening.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting places to be.
Yeah, street art doesn't really do it for me.
No.
So, I mean, I'll appreciate creativity and style, and there's some great street art out there, but it is the writers, the graffiti writers, I'm more interested in. I think going back to the kind of the how large London is London is just large.
Yes.
So though the photography world is small, obviously compared to Cardiff and London, it's different. I mean, the photography scene in London is big enough for you to have people you don't like. And have, it's that kind of, it can be complicated.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's enough people there to collaborate with and work on things at different times in your lives. And also, meeting up for a coffee and having a chat with people and sharing. Some people, I've found over the years, some people can be really giving and really share and help. And I certainly try and do that. I get photographers email me, and I'll always meet up for a coffee and a chat.
Yeah.
I get a lot of emails about zines, people thinking about doing zines and or self-publishing, and basically the coffee shop at the photographer's gallery, meet for a coffee, have a chat about it, and hopefully I help them think about it. So
pass it on,
yeah. And I suppose in this new brave world, I should probably try and think of how to monetize that and turn it into a workshop or a masterclass. But I've not done that. But I'm not saying I wouldn't.
Jumping ahead a little, and your new project, Vandals, which is
that's a jump,
a big jump, I know. But I think kind of right time to sort of talk about it. But there was a program on telly the other night about the Middle Ages. And art in the Middle Ages, and it was surprising because there was a wonderful quote in it about vandals, which was written in 1663. Definition of a vandal: a vandal is a willful destroyer of anything beautiful, venerable, or worth of preservation. And it went on to say that vandals were wanderers, looking for something, a lost people. And do you think?
It's a brilliant quote.
It's a brilliant quote.
It off you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. They were kicked out of Europe, the Vandals, and they went to North Africa and then moved along the North African coast and ended up in Carthage and created amazing art. They created of its period. There was sort of mosaics, etc., etc. But they were well into art. Now, that word vandals has been appropriated by the establishment as being something nasty and evil and bad. Now, let's discuss.
Well, the new zine is predominantly pictures of a graffiti crew in London who they do a mixture of legal and illegal graffiti. So that's why it's called Vandals, a name that they're very happy with. So obviously the kind of establishment state view of vandalism and the idea of using the word, that's one way of using the word. But obviously the subjects of this documentary project are quite happy with the badge of honour of being called vandals, and they refer to each other as vandals, and the graffiti scene does that. So it's a good name, and it's a good name for the project because it's also an honest representation of how they see themselves, but also maybe how people who don't like what they do see them. So
are they wanderers in that respect? Are they?
I think they might be actually, when they're wandering over rooftops and over fences, wandering the city, and particularly with where my work's going, the idea of the neoliberal city, the city that's under lockdown, the city that's privatised, the city that is controlled, the city that is under surveillance, and you have these young men who are disrupting that. They may have many different reasons why they're doing what they're doing, and for me to intellectualise it, they may laugh at me. I actually have an academic writing a foreword for Vandals. First time I'm ever having a foreword in one of my zines. An urban geographer is going to write 200 words explaining Vandals, so that will be interesting.
Yes.
But I think graffiti writers have many reasons why they do what they do, and they come from many different types of backgrounds and different age groups and social groups and ethnic groups. but predominantly men, it seems.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask you, because
not exclusively,
not exclusively,
but predominantly, I would say.
Right. Why do you think that would be the case?
That's a really good question. I don't think I have the answer. I mean, there is kind of a machoism, and there's kind of, but any kind of description of trying to answer that question will give a disservice to the women that do it. So I don't want to do that, because there are women that do it. But I like the description of the wanderers, wandering the city, looking for opportunity to write your name on a wall.
Yeah.
And even though it's maybe temporary, I mean, the hope is maybe it's there for a long time. The hope that it's in a position or a place of prominence that can be respected. But obviously the city moves and changes, things get painted over, other graffiti tags get painted over the one that's been put up. Obviously with technology, and going back to photography and how photography's changed, obviously the writers photograph their own work, and then there's a documentation of their own work, which could be classed as evidence as also of their own criminality, if that's how the state would look at it. So.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing, photographing them doing
it's
this.
It's a criminal act, is it?
Well, I'm not doing a criminal act, but some of them are engaging in what would be seen as criminal damage. I'm documenting them doing that. So potentially I'm providing evidence of that criminality, potentially, or alleged criminality, as we're recording.
Yeah.
But I'm there to document a subculture. I'm trying to understand it, and I'm trying to inform the public about this subculture, that it's not just, not the two-dimensional view of how people see graffiti writers.
Do you admire them?
That's a really good question, and kind of loaded.
Yeah, it is very.
And I'm sure the lawyers for this project will be wanting me to answer it very, very carefully. I'm a documentary photographer. I think what I document is truthful of what is in front of me. But at the same time, I'm a sentient being, and I am not impartial. I'm a product of my upbringing, my class, my educational background, and my general interests. So my work is visually polemic. It is a viewpoint, but actually I think that even protects me further, and actually I think it protects the public, because they know where I'm coming from. I am a left-wing photographer. I'm against the neoliberal city. I'm interested in documenting people that are disrupting that. So there is a politics there. But at the same time, I think the ethics of what I do is very honest. What I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to produce is an honest representation of this. I don't think I could get in this close to people if they didn't trust me and didn't understand. I mean, I've never done graffiti myself. I've never got a desire to do graffiti. But I do understand it a lot more than I did before I started photographing this. And I respect the act of disruption, the act of transgression.
Yes.
So that's a real roundabout way of trying to maybe saying yes.
Did you protest when you were younger?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was. From the 80s onwards, I was involved in political protests.
Right. We're going to jump back a little bit.
Back to the protest work.
Yeah, the protest work and the miners' strike, especially. And it became, because I kind of lived through all that. I was living in the valleys and had connections in West Wales with miners in West Wales, and it was a very strange time to live through. And what became apparent was the full-on nature of the power of the state.
Absolutely.
And the only other time I'd come across this was when I actually sat down in a court of law when the judge stood. We all sat down, and to feel the power of the state saying send them down because of contempt of court and all that sort of stuff. It's quite a frightening thing. It really gets the adrenaline pumping, makes your heart pump. But the state today is not so full on. It's not apparent. It's kind of under the surface type of clamping down on people. Are you aware of that? Is that something you've come across?
I remember, I can't remember where I was, but I was in the countryside somewhere a few years back, and I felt very free when I got out of the car. I kind of felt very relaxed, and I was trying to work out what it was, and I realised there was no CCTV cameras.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And it kind of freaked me out a little bit, because it was just like, it was a realisation that, you know, living and working in London all my life, and just about every move you make is recorded in one way or the other. So that's kind of interesting. I think the British state is quite good. It's reasonably sophisticated in repressing free spirit and freedom of expression, and a kind of the self-censor aspect. You know, you self-censor your behaviour.
Yes.
So there's kind of lack of freedom. But I think at times the British state can show its teeth. I think after the big riots of a few years back, a message was sent that you're not going to do this again. And you counterpose that with the damage that, you know, I know it's a cliche, but the bankers did in 2008. You know, a few people smashing a few windows and stealing some bottles of water are neither here or there. I mean, I'm not, obviously, you know, people that were hurt, obviously, you know, that's, you know, unnecessary. But yeah, you do that kind of, that you felt like the British state was having a go there. But then obviously, you know, when I was covering a protest in 2006 in Parliament Square and assaulted by police officers and hospitalised, I very much felt a very brutal aspect of the state that day.
But do you think the Liverpool 96 and the potential for officers who were involved in Orgreave to be sanctioned in some way, shape or form is going to change anything?
I think for the families, I think it's important to get that legal redress, and if police officers were involved in criminality, they need to go to prison. And in Orgreave as well. But I mean, you can get a Tory Prime Minister getting up and apologising for the political climate created by one of their heroes or heroines. They're cynical, aren't they? I mean, it's they're saying what they need to say right now. They wouldn't think twice about repressing a strike or political protest in the future.
Being a Londoner is really important to you, isn't it?
It's part of my identity.
Yeah.
A gallery owner recently said, my work is very London. Your work is so London. So I was like, yeah, give me a show.
So the Zines obviously is an ongoing thing with you, and you will pursue it, I guess, forever, I guess. Is it kind of a thing that will last for a long, long time?
Don't know.
Who knows?
If my designer dies, I mean, I don't know. I have to find another one. But it wasn't a great big plan. You know, we did the first one in 2012, Writers, of the first sort of part of the graffiti work, and I never thought there'll be another one or another one or another one or another one. But it's like we just keep on going and doing it. Just the pure beauty of having the work presented in that format. You know, having the work. Having that destination to the book format.
And dare I say, being accepted by the establishment, by Tate?
Yeah, because I'm a complete and utter sellout. Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, Tate Britain putting all of them into the library collection, not the collection, it's in the library collection, so not quite there. Yeah. But and also with Millbank and that van, the Cafe Royale book, you know, been in MoMA in New York. So yeah, so you know, I'll be dead, civilization survives, maybe, and someone can research these kind of quirky little books, scenes from decades before, and maybe it will be useful to someone. That's kind of cool.
I mean, going back to sort of the Vandals theme again, it's very ephemeral, the art, in a way, isn't it? And I was wondering if you have conversations with the guys about its ephemeral nature. I mean, what do they feel about its ephemeral nature?
And what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you know, because the council will come along, either paint it over or clean it off, and it's gone. It can be gone overnight. Is that important to them, or does that not matter to them, do you think?
I think if a piece is there for a long period of time, obviously that shows a certain amount of respect by maybe other writers, that the fact it won't be written over. Right. Or it's in a position where it's very difficult for an aspect of the state, part of the state, to paint it over, to buff it over. But then I think also that their self-documentation of their work, and it goes on a Instagram account, and it's out there. So it's a bit like installation art. I mean, site-specific installation art. An installation that goes into a particular space at a particular time, and is used in that space, and the only record of it is the documentation of that. It lends itself to that, which is kind of interesting. But I suppose if they happen to have a documentary photographer documenting it, I'm documenting them, because obviously I'm not particularly documenting what they're painting, I'm documenting them. But that must be an interesting thing to have. And it may be more interesting, 20, 30, 40 years later for them, that they can pull that off the shelf. And that was me when I was whatever age. So
So you have, we have a situation where you have a Banksy on a wall, and everybody goes, wow, Banksy on a wall. But one of these guys could equally do something exceptional on a wall, which would be regarded as illegal. So what makes Banksy, who decides that Banksy is good and their work is not so good?
Capitalism. Art market.
Simple as. And the idea that a judge in a court can decide what is artistic or isn't artistic is bizarre. Who's to say? I'm not a fan of Banksy's work. It's interesting that it's worth so much. And the fact that a piece of his goes up, gets put behind perspex and protected, and then the wall will be removed, and it's but it's the art market, it's capitalism. It's somewhere along the line, the added value has been added, and it has as far as that market is concerned. But the young graffiti writer that's doing something on a wall that I photographed, it could have as much artistic merit. Well, that's what is art. I mean, I went to art school. I got a degree and a master's in fine art, so maybe I can decide what is art more than a judge. But even then, why would it be down to anyone? Have you ever been tempted to actually make moving images?
No, I'm quite happy with stills.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, those moving images, they move, and there's all this sound stuff, and it sounds like a lot more hard work. So I think I'll leave that to the professional filmmakers.
And the Dillon project is a really, really interesting project.
You like the Dillon?
I really do. I think that has huge merit. I think it's...
Because some people don't. They kind of like, it's just a skate kid, what are you doing?
No, not at all. It's about human beings and about a human being, and I think that is huge value, especially over that length of time you intend doing it, and 4 years into documenting somebody's life.
For 10 years.
And you're going to do it for 10 years.
That's what we agreed. I mean, we'll see if we make it.
Yeah.
I mean, documenting Dillon Part 2 is basically ready to go. It's just that Vandals has kind of got in the way.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're friends now. When we first started, I knew his sister, and she introduced me, and he was up for it. But over the time, we've become friends. So in a way, the way it gets shot now is different. We'll meet up and have some food and have a wander around and take some pictures. So it is a different kind. It's very different for, say, Vandals.
Of course.
There's a different kind of relationship. And his life is changing, so therefore documenting other aspects of his life. And we'll see where it goes. Maybe by the end of it, he's not a skater. He'd kill me for saying that, but that would be kind of interesting.
It would indeed. Do you keep notes of your work, especially on a long project like that? Do you keep a diary of it, or
No, I don't.
No, just okay.
No, I don't keep anything like that.
Right, okay.
I've actually got a really good memory.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I don't write anything down.
I look forward to seeing more of that, because I think that's my favourite work.
Great.
You do. I think it's fantastic. And
what's your least favourite of mine?
Eh?
What's your least favourite?
Least favourite of yours?
That would be interesting. You're just like, I don't get that.
Well, no, I was intrigued. I've been intrigued by your work for a long time, and I guess the Berlin one I did find a little difficult.
And I was,
I kind of didn't float my boat very much.
Yeah.
But maybe I don't fully understood its context. Maybe
it's true though. I mean, I've got mixed feelings by it because it is literally a 2-hour walk around that particular park in Berlin.
Yeah.
And the pictures aren't as strong. I mean, maybe it was a tactical mistake on my part having a launch of the Photographer's Gallery and then BJP doing a feature on it. And it's kind of like maybe people who didn't know who I was then seeing all this and thinking, God, this work's crap. Who's this guy?
So are there gatekeepers in the world that we work in? That gatekeepers that will allow this sort of work in, but not...
I suppose that there are I think by the very nature there's gatekeepers. I mean, if you've got creators and directors of galleries, they're going to decide what they want. It's really interesting. Martha Cooper, the great Martha Cooper, who photographed all the kind of 70s graffiti in New York, had a show at a gallery in East London, and I went to a talk that she did and got to meet her and take some pictures, and some film director I know who's an old graffiti guy who's doing stuff, so it's all really good, really great stuff. And I really thought the gallery would take a few of the zines, and I dropped them off, and they held on for weeks to make a decision, the director of the gallery. And they came back in the end and said no. And it was one of those moments when I really thought, I'm really surprised that this particular gallery isn't taking this stuff, considering that you've just had Martha Cooper, not putting myself up to the same level as her. I'm a huge fan of her work. But here is some stuff of London graffiti, of public-private space. Why wouldn't you take it? I have no answer. No, they didn't explain it themselves. They got no obligation to explain themselves.
Yes.
The irony is this was a small gallery on Brick Lane, but Tate Britain takes it, but they didn't. So, I mean, some gatekeepers are nicer than other gatekeepers. Why things end up in magazines, why people are hot at this particular moment or particular time. I mean, I don't like going to private views. I don't play the game. I don't do awards, don't enter awards. I mean, I'm not very good at schmoozing because I get kind of intolerant of people. If I think I'm allowed to swear in this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, if I think someone's an arsehole, I'm not going to put any time in to try and ingratiate myself with them. Yeah. I'm just getting on with what I want to do.
Yes.
And make what I'm making. Obviously, I'm hoping there's an audience for it and that people will like it and get it and understand it and want to buy it.
Yeah.
And if some of those are gatekeepers and they can give you more access and more financial stability, then all well and good.
Is there any area you wouldn't tackle in that sort of subterranean world that, the graffiti world? Is there anything that you think, I'm not sure?
Yeah, even with vandals, there's been a full stop because I've not documented anything to do with trackside. So, I mean, the British Transport Police are very hot and, in my view, rather repressive. But if the writers I was documenting were doing stuff like that on their train lines or track sides, and if I was photographing that would put a huge, great big flashing light on me. And I've consciously decided not to document that. But there's the ethical and legal questions of if I start trespassing, especially if it's a train track. So I'm also 47, Will I be climbing over those types of fences?
Yes.
I mean, there's some fences I can climb over, but there's not those kind of fences.
I get one more question there, really. I'm intrigued that you did a lot of writing, especially for The Guardian, etc. Do you still write?
No.
No interest?
Absolutely no interest. It was a time it was the right time, right place. It was the political protest stuff. It was the assaults on me. It was being put under surveillance by the police because of that. It was all the stuff around Section 44, the Terrorism Act. I'm a photographer, not a terrorist. The NUJ stuff I was involved with. So I started doing the communist-free pieces for The Guardian, but that's because I was working on an investigation with them. So they kind of gave me all the communist-free stuff to kind of build me up, I think, in a way, build the brand. And then it was, I took these stories about surveillance and the environmental activists and all of that, all to The Guardian. Got the front pages, the articles, all of that. It was a good couple of years of really interesting, amazing work. And I never thought, I would ever be the person that would ever done that kind of stuff. I love the fact that exists. I know my mum loves it. That not only did I have a picture credit on the front page, but I also had an article credit on the front page of the Guardian and the FT. So it's right time, right place. I mean, saying that, I recently wrote something that was kind of like a communist free on my own blog about the EU referendum.
Yes.
And that's the most recent thing I've ever done where I actually sat down and thought, I'm going to write something. And I did that to try and work out what I was going to do, how I'm going to vote. But when I made that very conscious decision to move away from the protest stuff, all the investigations, all the surveillance stuff, all of that, just to kind of draw the line, move away from it. That's when all the graffiti stuff came, and then all the more back to the skateboarding, back to all the kind of the youth culture, kind of back to where I started really, but with 20 years experience and 20 years eyes, and hopefully 20 years better photographer.
Yeah, that's a bit of a circle really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a circle, and I feel much more comfortable. I feel much happier where I'm at with that, and I also think the work is better. I've got no desire to sit down and write anything, even for money. So
seems a good place to stop. Thank you very much, Marc.
Okay,
Cheers.
thank you.
Thank you.